OpenAI has just introduced big changes to the API. These are updates that make the models more usable, more steerable, and more affordable. And we'll look at those details just now. And here is a summary of the content of the updates. First, they have new function calling capability in the chat completions API, and they have an updated and more steerable versions of GPT-4 and GPT-3.5-turbo. This means you can configure the API using system messages. They also have the new 16K context version of GPT-3.5-turbo, 4 times the standard 4K version. They also have a 75% cost reduction in the state-of-the-art embeddings model, which is used for retrieval. Additionally, they also have a 25% cost reduction on input tokens for GPT 3.5 Turbo, and they're announcing a deprecation timeline for GPT 3.5 Turbo 0301 and GPT 40314 models. So next we look at the function calling, and they say here, developers can describe functions to GPT 40613 and GPT 3.5 Turbo 0613 and have the model intelligently choose to output a JSON object containing the arguments to call those functions. And this is a new way to more reliably connect GPT's capabilities with external tools. All they're saying is that the GPT will take in the query and output a format tailored to an external tool. This allows you to have GPT communicating with another API and have the results summarized by ChatGPT and given back to you. And we'll see an example of that. They say here, these models have been fine-tuned to both detect when a function needs to be called, which depends on the user's input, and to respond with JSON that adheres to the function signature. The function calling allows developers to more reliably get structured data back from the model. And we'll see some examples here. The first example is creating chatbots that answer questions by calling external tools. These are such as the ChatGPT plugins. And we see here an example where you have a query which is in natural language saying email Anya to see if she wants to get coffee next Friday. And this converts to a function call that would call a function called, say, send email. And that function takes as input a variable 2, which is a string, and a variable body, which is another string. And another example is a query saying, what's the weather like in Boston? Becomes a function call to a function get current weather, which has input parameters location, which is a string, and then unit, which is another choice between 2 variables, which is Celsius or Fahrenheit. So as you can see here, the queries are being converted from natural language to an API call. We also see here another set of conversions where you convert natural language into API calls or database queries. And here's an example. A business owner asking, who are my top 10 customers this month? And this is converted by the model to get customers by revenue call to a function, and the input parameters are the start date, the end date, and the limit. And we also have a different query, which is how many orders did Acme Inc. place last month? And this is converted to an SQL query, and the function call is to SQL underscore query function with a query as input string. And further, we have the example for extract structured data from text. And here we just have the function that would be called when this is asked for. And this would be the function called extract people data. Parameters would be the name, birthday, and location. And this function would be called, I guess, with an input, which would be a Wikipedia article. And so they say these use cases are enabled by the new API parameters in our V1 chat completions endpoint and function call that allow developers to describe functions to the model via JSON schema and optionally ask it to call a specific function. And they give us more information how to get started with the developer documentation and the add evals, which are these documents here, which will show you in detail how to call the API and how to use the function calls using examples. And they also have the evals GitHub, where you have the benchmarks that you can run to check the model that it's working the way you expect it to work. We can go ahead now and look at the function calling examples with the code. First, we see the first example that we saw before, which is what's the weather like in Boston right now. And that is converted by the API to a query in JSON with a function call. We see the response from the OpenAI API, which is then calling this function called getCurrentWeather with the arguments. And this function call is used to call a third-party API, which then is seen here using the curl command to call the weather API. And the response from the weather API is this JSON string. And then the OpenAI API takes that input and formulates the answer to return back to the user. You have the response here, which now is in natural language again. So you have that output, which is the weather in Boston is currently sunny with a temperature of 22 degrees Celsius. You can see this is the output of the model, but the API actually had a more terse output. So you can see that difference there. This is what the model is able to do for you. And we'll look at the new models now. They say GPT-4 here has been updated to GPT-4.0.6.1.3, which includes an updated and improved model with function calling. And we also have GPT-432K.0.6.1.3, which includes the same improvements as GPT-4 previously here stated, as well as the increased context length for better comprehension of large text. They say with these updates, we'll be inviting more people from the waiting list to try GPT-4 over the coming weeks, with the intent to remove the waiting list entirely with this model. So we hope that will happen soon. And then there's the throttling problem where you can only make so many queries. We hope this improves soon. We have the improvements in GPT-3.5-turbo. The new models then are GPT-3.5-turbo 0.6.1.3, and these include the same function calling as GPT-4, as well as more reliable steerability via the system prompt setting. The two features now allow developers to guide the model's response more effectively. We also have the context window expansion here. So GPT 3.5 Turbo 16K now offers 4 times the context length of GPT 3.5 Turbo at only twice the price. That's good. And they say the price here is $0.003 per 1K input tokens and $0.004 per 1K output tokens. They say that the 16K context window means the model can now support approximately 20 pages of text in a single request. And this is very welcome because, as you know, we've had many open source models that have shown that they can now take in a much larger context window. Of course, the models themselves are much smaller than ChatGPT, so it's easier for them to do that. But now it's good that GPT 3.5 Turbo is also able to do the same. Then we have the model deprecations. With the new models, some of the older models will not be available after a while. So they say today we'll begin the upgrade and deprecation process for the initial versions of GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 Turbo. We announced in March. Applications using the stable model names GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4, and GPT-432K will automatically be upgraded to these new models listed above on June 27th. For comparing model performance between versions, our evals library supports public and private evals to show how model changes will impact your use cases. So that's a good way to check that the new models behave the way you expect them to. And they have an important message here. Developers who need more time to transition can continue using the old models by specifying the specific model in the model parameter of their API request. They say these older models will be accessible through September 13th, after which the request specifying these models will fail. Now, the best part of this, they say the lower pricing and the embeddings now 75% cheaper. That is using text embedding ADA 002, that's $0.1 per a million tokens. Wow, that's good. They say today we are reducing the cost of GPT 3.5 Turbo's input tokens by 25%. Developers can now use this model for just $0.0015 per 1K input tokens and $0.002 per 1K output tokens, which equates to roughly 700 pages per dollar. They say here that GPT 3.5 Turbo 16K, the new model will be priced at $0.003 per 1K input tokens and $0.004 per 1K output tokens. Those are the changes. Keep supporting the channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.